This lesson is 3.2, Quadratic Functions and Graphs. We're going to learn about quadratic functions, how to complete the square to get vertex form, and then to analyze the parts of the graph. So a function defined by p of x equals ax squared plus bx plus c, where a is not 0, is called a quadratic function. The x squared is what makes it quadratic. Now, a quadratic function can be rewritten into the form p of x equals a, parentheses x minus h, the quantity squared, plus k by completing the square. Notice the x is the same x as it had in the previous formula. The a is the same a, but b and c are not used anymore, and we'll get new numbers, h and k. So don't think that b is h and c is k or something like that, because it doesn't work like that at all. B and C will disappear and become completely new numbers. So to complete the square, notice we want an x minus h, the quantity squared. So we need a perfect square trinomial that we can factor into that form. To do that, we have to follow several steps. So let's look at this first one here. Complete the square for each quadratic function. Number 1, p of x equals x squared plus 12x minus 7. So if you want to write these steps in the margin somewhere, don't write them underneath this question, but write them in the margin. First step is to divide both sides by a. If a is 1, we don't need to do anything. And on this one, we have a 1x squared, so we won't do step 1 on this first question. Then you'll rewrite the equation with blanks. You'll have a plus blank and a minus blank. You'll see what I mean in a minute. Then we'll complete the square. And to complete the square, you take half of b and square it. And that number will go in each blank. Then we'll factor it, and then we'll undo what we did before when we divided both sides by a. We'll come back and multiply both sides by a. And again, since a was 1, we don't need to do step 5 on this first one either. So let's follow the steps here and do this first question. Now, since there is no a here other than 1, let's go ahead and rewrite this with blanks. So p of x equals, I'm going to put a parentheses, and I'm going to keep the x terms together. X squared plus 12x, and then I'm going to put plus blank. I'm going to close the parentheses, and then keep my minus 7 outside, and I'm going to say minus blank. Since I added something here, I need to subtract that item here because it's on the same side of the equal sign, and that way my equation stays balanced. It'll change the appearance of it, but the value will remain the same. Now the number that goes in this blank is half of b squared. b is 12. So half of 12 squared, that's a 6 squared, which is 36. So I'm going to put a 36 in those blanks. It's going to be an x squared plus 12x plus 36 minus 7 minus 36. And now this is a perfect square trinomial. I know it is because I completed the square. This is a guaranteed perfect square trinomial now, and it will factor. And that's the next step, is to factor it. Think about it. It's a perfect square trinomial, x plus what? Well, the numbers that multiply to get 36 and add to get 12, and that's 6 and 6. So it's x plus 6, the quantity squared. Another way to quickly look at it is that this first term is the square root of the x squared. The plus sign is that same plus sign. If this was a minus 12x, we would have a minus here. And then the last term is the square root of the 36. Negative 7 minus 36 is negative 43. Then we would multiply both sides by a, but since a was 1, we don't need to do that. So we are technically done. I will rewrite this just to make it look neater. And what we have, p of x equals x plus 6, the quantity squared minus 43. And if I want to analyze the parts here, a is a 1, h, remember we have a minus h in the formula, so h would be a negative 6, and then plus k in the formula, k is a negative 43. So divide both sides by a, rewrite with the blanks. In the blank goes half of b squared, factor it, and then multiply by a. Let's do the next one. P of x equals x squared minus 10x plus 2. A is 1, so dividing by it is unnecessary. So let's rewrite with the blanks. Keep your x terms together, the x squared and the 10x, and then say plus blank, and then your plus 2 and minus blank. Remember, this one is a minus blank. Now complete the square. Half of b squared. Half of negative 10 squared. That's a negative 5 squared, which is 25. So we'll put a 25 in the blank. X squared minus 10x plus 25 plus 2 minus 25. Now we can factor it. What multiplies to get 25 and adds to get negative 10? That's a negative 5 and a negative 5. You could also think the square root of x squared is x, minus is a minus, square root of 25 is a 5. Either way, you get negative 5 there. Plus 2 minus 25 is negative 23. We would then multiply by a, and since a is 1, this one is finished. P of x equals x minus 5, the quantity squared, minus 23. We have completed the square by getting a perfect square trinomial, which factors like this. Now let's see what happens when a is something other than 1. Here, a is 2. So let's start by dividing both sides by 2. Now over here, we're going to have p of x divided by 2. Divide each term by 2. 2x squared divided by 2 is x squared. 4x divided by 2 is 2x. Negative 18 divided by 2 is negative 9. Now let's rewrite with the blanks. X squared plus 2x plus blank minus 9 minus blank. What goes in the blank? It's half of b squared. B is 2, so half of 2 squared, 1 squared, is a 1. Adding 1 and subtracting 1 doesn't change the value, it only changes the appearance. Now let's factor. What multiplies to get 1 and adds to get 2? That's a 1 and a 1. Or you could say the square root of x squared is x. Plus is plus. Square root of 1 is 1. Either way, that's how it factors. Negative 9 minus 1 is negative 10. Now since a was 2, we need to finish up and multiply both sides by the 2. It's easy to make a mistake here. Just watch how it happens. Get the page back. So 2 times p of x over 2 is just p of x. And then distribute. I'm going to go 2 times the quantity and 2 times the negative 10. 2 times the quantity is just 2 times the quantity x plus 1 squared. 2 times the negative 10 is negative 20. Notice I didn't distribute within the x plus 1. I'm leaving it out because that squared would mess everything up. So it's just 2 times this whole piece and then 2 times the negative 10. That is now finished. Here's another one. What if we have a 3x squared minus 15x plus 24, and a is 3? We'll start by dividing both sides by 3. That gives you p of x over 3 equals 3x squared divided by 3 is x squared. Negative 15x divided by 3 is negative 5x. And 24 divided by 3 is 8. Notice also this value 15 was changed. Your paper probably says 18. Make sure you change that to 15. 3x squared minus 15x plus 24. So we get this. Now let's rewrite with the blanks. P of x over 3 equals x squared minus 5x plus blank plus 8 minus blank. What goes in the blank? Half of b squared. B is 5, so half of 5 squared. 5 halves squared is, you square the 5, square the 2, that's a 25 fourths. 25 fourths. Now let's factor. P of x over 3 equals, this one might be hard to think what multiplies to get 25 fourths and adds to get negative 5, but just follow the other pattern. Square root the x squared, that's a x. That minus is a minus. And the square root of 25 fourths, square root the top, square root the bottom, that's a 5 halves. Then we have 8 minus 25 fourths. Get a common denominator. Right now the denominator on the 8 is a 1. It needs to be a 4, so if we multiply top and bottom by 4, that's a 32 fourths. So 32 fourths minus 25 fourths is 7 fourths. So we have 7 fourths out here. Then we need to get the 3 back over. We'll multiply both sides by 3 times 3 times 3. 3 times p of x over 3 is just p of x. That's the whole reason we did it, so that would cancel out. Then do the 3 times the quantity and 3 times 7 fourths. 3 times the quantity is just 3 parentheses x minus 5 halves squared. Remember, don't distribute within this parentheses. And then 3 times 7 fourths, put the 3 over 1 if you need to. Multiply top, multiply bottom. That's a 7 times 3 is a 21. 4 times 1 is 4. And nothing will reduce there. We are finished. When you have fractions, try to keep them as fractions. If if they need to be decimals, they had better be exact decimals. If it's a decimal you have to round, don't do it. Leave it as a fraction instead. Let's do a couple more here. Same job. First step here on p of x equals x squared plus 5x minus 3. We would divide by a, but since a is 1, we don't need to do that. So let's rewrite with the blanks. X squared plus 5x plus blank minus 3 minus blank. Then we'll complete the square. What number goes in the blank? We'll do half of b squared. b is 5. Half of 5 squared. That's a fraction squared. Square the top, square the bottom. 5 squared is 25, and 2 squared is 4. So we got a 25 fourths. That's the number that completes the square. Now let's factor. The square root of x squared is x. That plus on the 5x is a plus here. And the square root of 25 fourths, square root the top, square root the bottom. Square root of 25 is 5. Square root of 4 is 2. And that's the quantity squared. Negative 3 minus 25 fourths. Well, 3 is currently over 1. Let's get a common denominator. It needs to be a 4, so let's multiply top and bottom by 4. That gives you 12 fourths. So if I had negative 12 fourths minus 25 fourths, that's how many fourths? Negative 12 minus 25 is negative 37. So this will be negative 37 fourths. Nothing reduces, so that one is complete. Again, when you have fractions, try to keep them as fractions. If they need to be decimals, make sure they are exact decimals. Don't round it. If you need to round it, just leave it as a fraction. One more of this same type here. P of x equals 4x squared minus 28x plus 15. Since a is 4, we need to divide both sides by 4. That gives you p of x over 4. Then over here, 4x squared divided by 4 is x squared. Negative 28x divided by 4 is negative 7x. 15 divided by 4 is 15 fourths. Now let's rewrite with the blanks. P of x over 4 equals, and we'll keep the x squared and x's together, plus blank, and then plus 15 fourths minus blank. What number goes in the blank? Half of b squared. Half of negative 7 squared. Square the negative 7, square the 2, you get 49 fourths. Now factor it. Square root the x squared, that's an x. That minus sign there. Square root 49 fourths. Square root of 49 is 7. Square root of 4 is 2. Now we already have a common denominator here, so 15 fourths minus 49 fourths. That will be a negative, what is that there, 34? Yeah, 34 fourths. I could reduce that, but since I'm getting ready to multiply everything by a 4, I'll just leave it the way it is, and it'll it'll get canceled out in the end anyway. So let's go ahead now and multiply both sides by a, which is the 4. Remember, on the right side, 4 times the quantity and 4 times 34/4. On the left, 4 times p of x over 4. The 4's cancel, leaving p of x, which is what we wanted. On the right, 4 times the quantity is 4 times x minus 7/2 squared. Don't distribute there. And then 4 times negative 34/4. Well, the 4's cancel, leaving a negative 34. And that's all we have. Nothing else will reduce. It is in simplest form, and we are done. Just remember, you got to rewrite with the blanks, and the number that completes the square is half of b squared. Now let's talk about what these numbers mean. When you have a graph, p of x equals a parentheses x minus h, the quantity squared, plus k. The graph is a parabola with vertex hk. Notice this is a h. The formula had a negative h. So whatever is in the formula, change the sign to get h in the vertex. This is a plus k in the formula, so k will keep the sign. Change the sign on h, keep the sign on k. The vertical line x equals h is the axis of symmetry, whatever that h value is. If a is positive, the graph opens up, and if it's negative, the graph opens down. And if a is positive and it opens up, that means we have a low point, and then it goes upward to infinity. So the vertex would be a minimum, and k will be a minimum value. Now if a is negative, that's a parabola that opens downward. It will go down to negative infinity and have a high point here. Then the vertex will be a maximum point. And k will be a maximum value. So when it opens up, the vertex is a minimum, and when it opens down, the vertex is a maximum. It sounds like it's the opposite thing happening, but when you think of the shape of the graph, you can tell. Let's write the vertex, the equation of the axis of symmetry, tell the direction of opening, and state any maximum or minimum values. Number 7, p of x equals 5 parentheses x minus 2, the quantity squared, plus 7. The vertex, remember, change the sign on h, so minus 2 becomes positive 2. Keep the sign on k, that'll be a 7. Axis of symmetry, we'll call it AOS. X equals h, so x equals 2. It's always x equals that number because these are vertical parabolas. The direction of opening, we'll call that a DOO, direction of opening. Since a is positive, it opens up. And when it opens up, we have a minimum value at k. The minimum is 7. And there is no maximum. So if we have a maximum, that will be none. Number 8, p of x equals negative 1/2, parentheses x plus 3, the quantity squared, plus 1. The vertex is hk. H gets the opposite of this. Opposite of 3 is negative 3. K keeps the sign. It's a positive 1. Axis of symmetry is x equals h, so x equals negative 3. The direction of opening, A is negative, so it opens down. When it opens down, it has a maximum value. Maximum value is K, that's a 1. Whether it's a maximum or minimum, it's still the K value. And since it has a maximum, there is no minimum, so minimum is none. These are misnumbered, obviously, because this is another 7 and 8, but that's okay. For this one, p of x equals negative 2 parentheses x minus 1 squared minus 4. The vertex, change the h, that'll be a positive 1. Keep the k, negative 4. Axis of symmetry, x equals h, so that's x equals 1. Direction of opening, a is negative, so it's down. When it opens down, it has a maximum of k, which is negative 4. And there is no minimum here. On this last one, p of x equals 3/4 parentheses x plus 8, the quantity squared, minus 6. Vertex changes the sign on 8, keeps the sign on k, negative 8, negative 6. Axis of symmetry, x equals h, so x equals negative 8. Direction of opening, a is positive, so it opens up. Since it opens up, it has a minimum value, so there is no maximum. And the minimum value is negative 6. So we know how to analyze the parts of the equation. State the vertex, the axis of symmetry, the direction of opening, and the maximum or minimum. Now that axis of symmetry, if we were to graph this one, there's our coordinate plane. The vertex is negative 8 and negative 6, which is down here somewhere. It opens upward. And the axis of symmetry is an imaginary line which you can see cuts the parabola in half. That's the axis of symmetry. Negative 6 is the minimum value. Or number 7 here, if this was our graph, it would be 1, negative 4. It's about right there. It opens down. And the axis of symmetry is that imaginary line. X equals 1. Cuts the parabola in half again. Since it opens down, it has a maximum, and the maximum is right there at negative 4. So you've got all the parts of the graph there. You know what they are. You know how they look. And all that came from the equation, which, remember, we completed the square. Half of b squared completed the square, so that will do it.